Welcome to the What Really Happened radio show. Because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Wednesday, February 17th, 2016, middle of the weekday, hump day, starting that long, slow glide down to Kaahumanu Friday. Boy, things are really getting crazy out there in the world. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645, 877-300-7645. Tom is sitting in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, and ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Our third hour guest today will be Larry Pinckney, former Black Panther, current activist. We're going to be talking about all kinds of things with him in our third hour, and, of course, the lovely Lady Claire will be joining us in hour number 3 on Friday. All right, let's start by going back and looking at the situation around Supreme Court Judge Scalia and all the oddities there. And at this point, it is looking like, yes, they'll get away with the murder. No, they are not getting away with the lie. According to a poll that was run at the Conservative Outfitters website, they found 79% of their readers think there was foul play in the death of Justice Scalia. We ran a similar poll at our website. We came out with 92% saying Scalia was assassinated. Now, there was an interesting little article put out by a nurse who is in Texas. And we're seeing just this grassroots movement to stand up and say, this is wrong. And this nurse is citing the actual Texas law, which says that death can only be legally declared by a doctor, a nurse, or a physician's assistant who have been trained in such things. And that under the strict interpretation of this law, a justice of the peace cannot declare somebody dead and send them off to the funeral home. So this idea that the justice of the peace was working within the Texas law, that's not true. That's not true. I mean, the idea is this justice of the peace was working over the telephone. The sheriff who was there is not trained as a homicide detective. And under this Texas law, he is not allowed to declare somebody to be dead. Now, they can say, they appear to be dead. Let's call for an ambulance or call for whatever. But this idea of being able to send the body right out to the embalmers, talk about a rush job. I mean, we saw exactly the same thing following Waco and the Oklahoma City bombing and 9/11, just this intense rush to scour the site, get rid of all possible evidence. Vince Foster, too. The FBI went in there and just re-landscaped the whole place to make sure nobody could go in and challenge the official story. Now, it turns out that Scalia's trip to this resort was a gift to him from the resort's owner. Say, come on out on this day. We're going to have a really good time. We're going to go quail hunting. The owner of the resort is defending this by saying, well, this is an annual event that he would do to invite his friends out to his ranch, and that there were about 20 other people who were invited to attend without having to pay for it. You know, on the house. Everything was on the house. But there are a lot of people out there who are just saying, this is obvious. This is so heavy-handed. Now, it turns out that there's a normal justice of the peace who should have had jurisdiction. And she was occupied that day with what is being described as a work-related event. Juanita Bishop. Now, she's already gone public saying, had she been there, she would have ordered an autopsy. But somehow or other, she was out of position, and this alternate Justice of the Peace, Cinderella Guevara, over the phone said, yeah, they're dead, no autopsy, we're fine. Or Scalia's dead, fine. And this Guevara has a prior record of being accused of a cover-up in another murder. And Guevara had ordered no autopsy on a young girl. And the parents said, we want an autopsy. We want to know how she died. And Justice Guevara said, no, we don't need it. Just rush it away here. So we're already starting to see a network of pre-existing corruption surrounding this death. It turns out the sheriff who was on the other end of that phone line saying, yep, nothing suspicious here. Danny Dominguez. Now, his sheriff's department is in a very wealthy area of Texas. There's virtually no crime there because everybody's well off. They're all millionaires. Hardly any crime. And yet somehow his sheriff's department has been handed millions of dollars in federal grants to fight crime in the rich people's neighborhood. And everyone just went, he doesn't actually need the money. There are areas in much more dire need of federal grants to deal with crime. Now, as you heard on the news break, President Obama is snubbing Scalia's funeral. They're going to walk by when Scalia is lying in state at the Supreme Court on Friday. The funeral's Saturday. Obama is not going. One of the reporters at the White House asked if Obama was going to be golfing that day and basically got a no comment. Maybe he doesn't want to repeat Bill Clinton's gaffe at Ron Brown's funeral, because if you remember that one, news cameraman caught Bill Clinton coming out of Ron Brown's funeral, and Bill Clinton was laughing and joking, and then he looks over and he sees the camera, and he immediately goes into his frowny face, wipes his eye. It's just amazing. Now, people are still dealing with the ramifications of Scalia no longer being on the bench. Obama is rushing forward trying to find a replacement. The Senate is saying they're not going to confirm. Period. End of discussion. They want the next president, who they hope to be conservative, make that call. Obama can still do a recess appointment, which would give him a liberal Supreme Court from now until the end of the year. But that's as long as it goes. But it's shaping up to be a huge fight. It's dominating the news now. Much to Hillary Clinton's relief, because the email server and her possibly being a spy for foreign governments is now off the corporate media's radar. Still on our radar, but off the corporate media radar. A lot of people are very concerned that Obama may move to basically end the Second Amendment or change it in some way. And we know how Common Core has been teaching the Second Amendment to young people. The Second Amendment gives you the right to keep and bear arms if you're in a state militia, which is not what the Second Amendment actually says. The argument going into the Supreme Court has always been when it says the right of the people, is it a collective or an individual right? And the Supreme Court has ruled it's an individual right because all of the other rights in the Bill of Rights are individual rights. Saying that the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms is a collective right is like saying freedom of speech is a collective right, that it's reserved to corporate media and ordinary citizens are not allowed, which they may get around to trying that one, this headlong rush down into dictatorship. And we know the gun grabbers are out there. I mean, they're celebrating already that, gosh darn Scalia, he was in the way of us disarming all of the American people. And remember, it wasn't all that long ago where Dianne Feinstein was out there saying all military veterans are mentally ill and should not be allowed to own firearms. They're specifically targeting military veterans because that is an already trained up military force who may not be loyal to the U.S. government that made them veterans, some of them wounded, if things really start coming apart. You can tell the U.S. government understands how close they push this nation to a revolution. They're trying to stack the deck in their own favor, which is what governments will tend to do. All righty, we're coming up on our first commercial break. We're going to be coming on back. There's dramatic happenings going on over in the war zones, emphasis on the plural. It looks like Turkey and Syria is about to explode and ignite World War III for real all across the globe. And it's a very tense situation. We'll talk about that when we come back from these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, and right on schedule. My server is being hit with a denial of service attack. I imagine somewhere out there in the world there are these people who are falling on the ground and they're kicking their feet and they're screaming and saying, he won't tell the people what we want him to tell the people. Let's wreck his server for him. They are such children. All righty, before we get into Syria and Turkey, we're going to grab a phone call from Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Yeah, I didn't think you talked about this yet. I just tuned in the S-300s arriving in Iran.
Yes.
These are actually the version 4 since they don't make the S-300 anymore, basically are basically upgraded to the S-400.
Yeah, Iran actually got, because of the sanctions, Iran actually made out very well. They paid for the 300, and they're basically getting the 400. It's a good deal for them.
It is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like, if Turkey does go in with Saudi Arabia into Syria, now all it takes is one NATO member to say no, right? And Turkey and Saudi Arabia would basically be on their own then.
Well, NATO is still taking the official position that this does not involve them because Turkey can invoke Article 5 only if Turkey is being invaded itself. But Turkey is the invading power. And so technically NATO, under the rules, NATO can't get involved because the NATO Mutual Defense Pact is for, as the word says, defense, not offense. The NATO alliance does not obligate the NATO nations to join a member nation in an attack on another country. So that's...
NATO won't do anything. NATO will get crushed. Like, if they would have done something, they would have done it already, either with the Russians or the Chinese.
I disagree. I disagree because in the court of world opinion, what they need is for Russia and China to look like the aggressors. And NATO may simply be waiting for this battle in Syria to get underway and for Russia to do something against Turkish forces where Turkey can say, oh, Russia is committing acts of war against our personnel, and even though they're deep inside Syria. So we'll see what's going there. I mean, unfortunately, everybody's gearing up for this war because they think it's going to solve all the world's economic problems or at least distract the world population from the economic problems.
And on that explosion in Turkey...
I'm going to be talking about that.
Yeah, that smells big time.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay?
And, okay, thanks, Mike.
All right, we're going to let you go here. Rush on here. Okay, now... Current score right now, we've been hearing for weeks and weeks about these people are moving up to Syria and these other people are moving up to Syria. And total tally right now, there are 350,000 soldiers, 20,000 tanks, and 2,500 warplanes sort of waiting in the area around Syria. Now, Turkey and the Saudis are seeking international backing for a Syria invasion. They're out there saying, the only way to fix Syria, we've got to go in and smash the place, and then we'll just rebuild it from the ground up the way that we ought to be. And Erdogan is insisting the Saudis are on board, which seems to be true. He's saying that certain of the European Union nations, which are still unnamed, are on board. We don't know if that's true or not. And, of course, cooler voices are saying, do we really want to go head-to-head with the Russians? Now, Turkey may have just received or manufactured an excuse to launch the ground war into Syria. There's been a car bomb explosion, although one witness said it was a military vehicle that blew up. 28 people dead, 61 injured. This explosion was outside a military barracks in Ankara near the parliament building. Security sources in Turkey initially said it appeared to be the work of ISIS. But, of course, now the Turkish government is saying, oh, it just obviously had to be the Kurdistan Workers' Party, the PKK. So, again, it feels like a false flag, because ISIS isn't going to be setting off bombs inside Turkey. Turkey has been supporting ISIS, giving them safe haven, weapons, supplies. The fight over the city of Azaz is because Azaz is the last remaining route to supply the terrorists inside Syria from Turkey. And the report that there was a military vehicle as the source of this huge explosion comes out of the Daily Sabah. So, yeah, it feels like it's another false flag. You know, how wonderfully convenient they get a big bombing in Ankara just as all the planes and tanks and soldiers and everything are already there ready to go. Now, here's an interesting story from Washington's blog where government officials admit Turkey repeatedly uses false flag terror to get what it wants. They're talking about one acknowledged case back in 1955, the bombing of a Turkish consulate in Greece. But the Turkish government actually did it and blamed it on Greece for the purpose of inciting anti-Greek violence. And then there was another one about the 1950s, carrying out explosions and blaming the communists. Now, we have an article over at our website of 47 different false flag attacks that have been officially admitted to by the governments that carried them out. And I think we can presume that for every one they officially admit to, because they really can't keep it covered up any longer, there's dozens, possibly hundreds more that are still classified. That's how they control you, lies, fraud, and deception. And sure enough, we're seeing this report coming out of South Front that Turkey says they're going to secure a 10-kilometer line inside Syria as a security buffer zone that happens to include the city of Azaz. They're trying to protect their lines of supply to the terrorist groups inside Syria that they're backing. And Erdogan openly admitted only a couple of days ago that, yes, Turkey is supporting ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Syria. All right, we're going to go ahead and grab some phone calls here. Jerry in California, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, you kept saying that, we've got this economy problem and they're going to have a war to get out of the economy problem. Wars destroys economies. They destroy cultures. They destroy everything. How do they expect us to do any good for the economy?
Well, what wars will do from the point of view of the bankers is force massive bombing and rebuilding. And the goal of a world war from the point of view of the banks is to plunge a nation into debt to that bank for the next 100 years. Have you read my article, All Wars Are Bankers' Wars?
No, I should do that.
Yeah, you need to take a look at that because that kind of lays out what's going on. For a lot of countries that have allowed their infrastructure to decay, like the United States, it's actually cheaper to let a war happen and just smash everything and rebuild from new than go back in and fix infrastructure underneath the cities that have been allowed to decay and to rot. And
that's destroy the dollar completely, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it depends on who wins that war. I mean, the goal from the U.S. is to return the world to Bretton Woods, where everybody has to use that dollar for global trade and banking, and that would restore demand for the dollar, and demand, of course, is the basis of value of any fiat currency. We need to let you go, Jerry. Thank you for the call, and we'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to take a phone call now from John in Barbados. John, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. Yes, I'm looking at this situation in Syria quite seriously now. But there is some strange and weird goings on, like Turkey overflying Greece's airspace. I mean, they're two NATO nations. This could escalate and cause a rift within NATO.
It very easily could, but there's one good thing about Turkey being that blatant in violation of Greece's sovereign airspace is it shows to the world Turkey is the aggressor.
Absolutely. And now I'm looking at this situation in Russia where we had Viktor Orban went over and was in talks with Vladimir Putin and have made some serious trade deals which seem to, in fact, go against the sanctions on Russia. And, of course, Viktor Orban is another prime minister that's actually blocked these refugees from going into his country. So there's a rift there. There's a rift with Britain, and it's Brexit. Britain exiting from Europe altogether. The whole thing looks ready to come collapsing down on itself.
Well, it's certainly in chaos to the point where nobody's really sure who they're fighting and which side anybody's on. And certainly when you look like at World War II, there was sort of a good idea of these people are on this side and these other people are on that side, and the battle lines were drawn. But this situation that is unfolding in Syria and Iraq, where the U.S. has been using these terrorist groups as proxies, there are some people who aren't really sure who the good guys are and the bad guys are, and we actually have U.S. allies fighting against CIA-supported terror groups. And that seems to me to be somewhat counterproductive.
Well, there are certain other things that are really disturbing in that area where now not only is the Syrian Arab army making terrific progress against these Takfiris, so is the Iraqi army.
Yes.
And And the problem I see with the Iraqi army is that America sees more of a hindrance than a help.
Oh, the Iraq government has come on out and said that the U.S. forces are getting in the way. They're acting like they're protecting ISIS, which is, yeah, that's exactly what they're doing. Now, right now, because Russia has air superiority over Syria and Iraq has air superiority over Iraq, the U.S. isn't able to get in there and supply ISIS and al-Qaeda from the air like they were before. Remember all these reports? They were seeing U.S. planes dropping supplies onto these terrorist groups. They can't do that anymore. They can't support by air, and that's why that land route through Azaz into Turkey is so critical. If the Syrian government forces and Russia cut that off, it's over. They'll just starve everybody, all those terrorist groups in the middle of Syria, into surrender.
Well, I think what's happening as well, there was a piece on the Russian Insider, and it makes clear certain aspects of this nonsense that's going on. And apparently this closed session of the UN has ordered Turkey to stop its attacks, stop its violation of international law.
Well, that's good. The question is whether Turkey will do that. I mean, that may be why Turkey staged this bombing in Ankara, so they can go to the UN and say, well, we're the ones who are being attacked. The Kurds did this to us. We have a right to defend ourselves, blah, 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 blah. Here's your rifle, Erdogan.
Well, anyway, Mike, I thought I'd put that to you that, you know, the whole of Europe is in chaos, not just because of the influx of refugees, or we can call them refugees.
Well, refugees, immigrants, the economic problems, the chaotic war. The situation is out of control. The people who thought they could control and direct this, they've lost their grip, and that's why it's so incredibly, incredibly dangerous. And all we need is whichever world leader is the least mentally stable to make a wrong move, and we're going to be off and running. And right now that's looking like Erdogan or Obama, just basically saying, oh, to heck with it, let's turn the brass keys in the silos.
Yeah, I think Erdogan and Davutoglu are the ones to watch. I mean, they seem to be borderline insane.
I'm beginning to wonder if that isn't something that we see in virtually all of the people who work that hard to become leaders of nations. That would they qualify as sane to us ordinary people here on the street? And I think the answer is no. We know that it takes a certain degree of sociopathy to function as a high-level politician. And again, what was that old line about the inmates are in charge of the asylum? It seems to certainly be true today. Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Anyway, thanks for having me, Michael.
All right, thank you very much here, and we're going to switch over to Mo in Florida. Aloha, Mo. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. Thank you for taking my call. I just we want to talk about Trump a little bit, if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
I just wonder what your thoughts are on. We all know what happened when Kennedy tried to cross the bankers and the Bay of Pigs and went against the entrenched establishment. With the FBI, CIA, and everybody involved. I just can't imagine how Trump, since he hasn't been a politician, is a plus, like you say, and it's refreshing. But he doesn't have the insight with these groups, and if he gets in there, he's done. If they can do 9/11, which we know they did with the Mossad, that they'll take him out in a minute. They don't care. I mean,
You know something. It may very well be that the reason Justice Scalia's assassination was made so obvious was to send a warning to Donald Trump, because now we have Obama out there saying that he's absolutely convinced Trump will not be the next president of the United States of America. It could very well be that in addition to shifting the court into Obama's favor, the reason they've made Scalia's assassination as obvious as they did is to send a warning to Donald Trump. Because apparently the engine on his aircraft failing a few weeks back didn't get through.
Wow, that's really scary. I'm starting to think now that's frightening. But I think, as much as I know you don't like this, and nobody really does, we need We need a military coup. We need somebody to pull the brakes on this thing before it goes hot.
I am hearing that more and more from a lot of different areas.
We need Smedley. Where's Smedley Butler when we need him?
Yeah, we really do need Smedley Butler right now, or another Eisenhower is what we need. Okay?
Yeah. Thank you, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to George in Texas. Aloha, George. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, how you doing, Mike? You know, the thing is, I even noticed, like, two high-profile people that sort of, like, died, I think, mysterious deaths is, Joan Rivers, I think, called, Obama's first lady a drag queen, and I think she, like, died a couple weeks later on a routine operation. And back during this campaign, looked at Bernie Mac, he ended up falling out with Obama, and like 2 weeks later, he was dead. And I looked up the symptoms to his, and it looked more like ricin poisoning than what they're saying.
Yeah, there's a lot of that going on. Somebody was writing in and said, how Sonny Bono, got murdered by a tree right after he uncovered that part of the CIA's cocaine running, that Iran-Contra thing, he'd found links to that inside Palm Springs, where he was the mayor, and then all of a sudden he's out there skiing, and a tree reaches out of the forest and just kills him.
Yeah, I got an off the cuff question. Are you getting a lot of offers for credit card offers, like you're pre-approved for credit card Capital One?
Yes, I am.
Because I just use them to start up my charcoal on the barbecue.
They're desperate to build up more debt. If they can't build up more debt, this whole Ponzi scheme, central bank, is coming down. Thanks for the call, George. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Now, what's going on here right now is the U.S. government still thinks they have you bamboozled, and they're still trying to play this, we're supporting the moderate Syrian rebels deception. And this is what comes from being a world leader who was surrounded by a staff of parasitic sycophants who are protecting their phony baloney high-paying jobs by telling the Führer what the Führer wants to hear rather than what the Führer needs to know about what's going on. That's a common feature of all mid-management. They're trying to make sure they're the only ones who know how bad things really are, because they don't want the subordinates to give up hope or the superiors to crack down on them. And if you're sitting on top of 3 levels of that kind of management, you are effectively deaf, dumb, and blind about what's really going on outside in the world. When you look at the legends of King Arthur, and you look at Merlin the magician, it's a very significant character, not because he's a magician. He was the one person in Arthur's court who could step around the hierarchy, go out into the country and see what was really going on, and bring that information back. All right, we're going to grab ourselves a phone call. Anthony in Canada, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I just wanted to follow up on my call on Monday. I know we were talking about Alex possibly supporting Hillary. Now, I was talking with a friend of mine that really follows him, and he said that, kind of corrected me. He goes, he's definitely not supporting Hillary.
Yeah, we dealt with that yesterday, and I did apologize to Alex Jones and his listeners, and I even have one of Alex Jones' Hillary for Prison T-shirts. So, we've already kind of cleared that confusion up, okay?
No, fair enough. But just the thing I was going to say, I think you were partially right. I think the reason they are supporting Hillary is because on a straight-up election, I think Bernie would have a much better chance against Donald Trump. So I think they are propping Hillary to beat Bernie because they figure that Donald will have a much better chance against Donald will have a much better chance against Hillary than he would against Bernie Sanders.
I actually saw that in an article that came out yesterday, and I don't think so. I mean, that seems to be coming from the same source as the people who were claiming that Trump was being set up to lose to Hillary, and that's why we had to support Jeb Bush and all the rest of it. The reality is Hillary is self-destructing, but to be very honest, I think Trump is going to be able to beat either one of them. I think he can beat Bernie Sanders just on sheer charisma, and Trump can beat Hillary just because Hillary is self-destructing. She's not going to be able to make it all the way to November before her financial shenanigans, the email scandal, and possible espionage are going to surface.
Okay, fair enough. And one thing about Scalia, I thought he was definitely one of the better justices in the Supreme Court. My only thing is with some of the conservatives and libertarian types, he did support Citizens United. That's one of my issues. Like, a lot of libertarians tend to be against corporate fascism, but then when it comes to money and politics, some of them are a little bit skewed on that issue. So I think that was the one issue with Scalia I kind of was against. He was kind of the one guy that kind of pushed Citizens United over, and I don't think that's been good for the American political system.
No, that hasn't been good to the American political system, and a lot of people are wondering what's going on. But we now know Supreme Court justices are subject to pressure. And the perfect illustration of that was Chief Justice Roberts, who literally at the 11th hour in the Obamacare case abandoned his absolute opposition to it, turned around and said, I guess it's legal under the Commerce Clause, ruled in favor of Obamacare, and then promptly left the country so the reporters couldn't chase him down and say, what the heck happened? And now that we have a real-life Pelican Brief case, a Supreme Court justice who's been assassinated apparently to shift the court for political gain, we can understand that high court isn't as well protected and isolated as we'd like to see it be. The reason Scalia was loved by many and loathed by others is because he was a strict constitutionalist, and he interpreted the Constitution on the basis of what he understood the framers of the Constitution originally intended. He wasn't open to this idea of reinterpreting the Constitution based on wishful thinking today. And because of that, the liberals absolutely hated him, because the changes they want to bring to the United States of America all involve changing the Constitution, reinterpreting. If they can't get an amendment through, they want to change the meaning of certain words and certain phrases to conform with their ideology. And Scalia wasn't going along with that. But, there are some important cases coming on up. One of them that is going to be very significant was whether legislative districts for the House of Representatives should be based on a count of the total population or a count of only the eligible voters. And that would definitely shift a lot of the boundary lines. And that one's coming up. And that was one that Scalia probably would have said, no, the Constitution says total population. And so we'll see what happens with that. Anyway, listen, we're coming up on the top of the hour, Anthony. Thank you very much for the phone call, and we're going to let you go. Pakistan is confirming they are participating in Saudi-led military drills, along with some of the other Islamic nations. Everybody's rehearsing and practicing. They're just waiting for a starting time on this thing. Now, Saudi Arabia itself may be in trouble. It's in serious economic straits because of this ill-considered attempt to destroy Russia's economy with an oil price war. And once they got the oil prices down, it's proving very difficult to get them back up. Russia and Saudi Arabia are saying they're going to limit production to increase demand and drive the price back up. Iran is not going along with it. They took a major hit with the sanctions, and now that they're allowed to sell their oil, they're going to be pumping it out there and enjoying the rise in prices until they get back to the volume of sales they were running before the sanctions began. Now, Saudi Arabia does not have a clear leadership from the top because the ruling family has hereditary mental illness. And so the country's actually being run by all these counselors and advisors that surround the throne, each of which has their own particular agenda and their own particular allegiances to their supporters. And Saudi Arabia is starting to look like it's becoming very unstable. The Saudi people are very unhappy. They got used to a very elevated standard of living during the heyday of Saudi Arabia, and now they're having to give that up. All of the things they were getting from the Saudi ruling family to go on supporting the Saudi ruling family, that's all going away. And so now the Saudi people are saying, maybe it's time that we adopt a government made up of elected leaders. So we could actually see Saudi Arabia be destroyed by this rush to create a war with Russia, so to speak. Over in the China Sea, China is now sending defense missiles to those islands, to that South China Sea island. They're deploying anti-air missiles. And this, let's be honest, it's being called a provocation in the Western media, but it's in response to all the continued U.S. violations of what China claims to be its territory, its sovereign territory. We've been hearing all these stories about how US B-52s, nuclear capable, are flying over the island just to prove that we can do it. And so is anybody really surprised that China is going to deploy missiles on that island that could shoot down nuclear capable bombers? The U.S. started this, and this is how they work. Little nudge, little nudge, little nudge until the other country reacts and then claim the reaction is the provocation event. We've seen that over and over and over and over again. And not just the U.S. Israel uses it against the Palestinians all the time. You know, abuse, abuse, abuse until somebody fights back. Oh, Palestine is attacking us. It's part of that recipe of ruling you through lies, fraud, and deception. And now that you're awake and you see through the matrix, you understand how this is getting done. Article over in Defense One, they're talking about the F-35, and it's what they describe as a terrifying list of defects. They're trying to get this thing into the air in service this year, hopefully by summer, and they're pointing out it's a flying piece of junk. It's a death trap. Its ejection seat can actually kill pilots. And until they actually get it in service, they don't know what's going on. But the Pentagon's Office of Testing and Evaluation is saying there are major problems and deficiencies. But it looks cool sitting on the runway, and it did make tons of money for the military-industrial complex and all those members of Congress who are in their pocket. And after all, that's really what's important. Actually, it doesn't look cool on the runway. I've been looking at pictures of the F-35 versus some of these newer Russian warplanes. Those are sexy birds. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2 here. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. Now, apparently, Obama is trying to put pressure on Putin to stop Russia's operations inside Syria, even though Russia is inside Syria at the invitation of the recognized elected government of Syria. And pointedly, Obama is not asking Erdogan to stop attacking Syria. He just wants Putin to stop bombing ISIS. That sort of tells you what's really been going on here. And remember, we've had multiple confirmations. Some of the emails from the Benghazi investigation, a recently declassified U.S. government confirms ISIS and Al-Qaeda are creations of the U.S. government. Proxies to go in and help destabilize countries so the U.S. can go on in and execute a regime change. Also, there's a little bit of ego going on here. Obama simply cannot accept a Russian success in Syria. And Obama is getting ready to throw a tantrum. Unfortunately, it's going to involve a lot of rapidly moving metal particles hitting innocent people. All right, let's talk about the economy here just a little bit. There's an observation coming in from RBTH saying that even if Russia and OPEC are coordinated together on the limiting of oil production, it's not going to change oil prices because along with Iran, there are a lot of other oil-producing nations that are not part of OPEC that are not going to go along with that. This is their chance to make back some of the money they lost on this brain-dead oil price war against Russia. I mean, something that really worries me is how the poor quality of thinking we're seeing coming out of Washington, D.C. We were all raised to think that these were somehow superior people. They're intelligent, they're smart, they're educated. Now we're finding out they're just con artists. They're good liars. But a good liar does not make a good ruler. And time and again, we have seen our foreign policy just be absolutely destroyed because these things are not being thought all the way through. Somebody's in there saying, oh, we'll lower oil prices, it'll destroy Russia. Great, let's do it. And that appears to be the end of the discussion. There's no careful analysis, or if there is, and I presume that there's some government person on a really good taxpayer-funded salary who's writing up an analysis saying this may not work, but that information isn't getting to the top. It's almost like the stock market. They're running it on faith and hope and magical thinking that somehow, if we just keep up the chaos, it's all going to sort on out. No, it isn't. Anyway. We've been hearing a lot about the so-called war on terror. I'm sorry, the war on cash. I'm multitasking here. And a lot of people are very concerned about it. We understand that over in the European Union, they're going to ban the 500 euro note. There's talk about banning the $100 bill here in the United States of America as kind of an incremental step. But what's really going on here, and this actually came out of a leaked document from a Morgan Stanley meeting, the goal of banning cash is to force you to have all your wealth in somebody's bank where they can apply negative interest rates to it. That you have no choice but to put your money in the bank and let the bank take part of it as part of the deal. It's another form of enslavement. You are not allowed to have your own wealth under your own control anymore. What a complete reversal from the way the United States was first created. Because when the United States was first created, the money was based on metals, silver and gold. When you got a silver dollar, the dollar was the silver inside it, not the coin. And when you had that in your hand, there wasn't a thing the banks or the government could do about it. You were free to put it in your pocket, spend it, do whatever you want. They couldn't change the value of it. And over time, the banks have first assumed control over the value of your money with this Federal Reserve note. And now they want to have control over where you put your wealth. I mean, even Adolf Hitler didn't go that far to say you will have your money in the bank. Hitler went the other way. Let's have a value-based currency and no more interest to the private central bank, which is what kind of started the world on the path to World War II. However, the good news is that apparently support for a cashless society is fading rapidly as more and more people realize it's not a good idea. And yes, illicit trade in various and sundry items does not want a cashless society. The drug trade doesn't want a cashless society. Most of that is now controlled by the CIA, so they're bringing pressure to bear. And there's a lot of people who do not want to live in a society where you cannot purchase anything without the government's permission. Can you imagine going into your local store and you go to the magazine rack and you pick up a magazine and the cash register says the government says you're not allowed to read that one. You've got too many dangerous ideas already. Or you go get a pint of ice cream and the cash register says, I'm sorry, because of Obamacare, you need to lose some more weight. You're not allowed to have that ice cream. That's what a cashless society really means. Government control over what you purchase and where and when. And people are digging in their heels on it. People are going to turn to their own alternative currencies. They're going to return to barter. Trying to push for a cashless society might accelerate the decline of the American banking system, which I think would be a good thing. Alrighty, let's see. Gold is already in a bull market in currencies other than the U.S. dollar. So that's kind of a weird thing. There's a process in economics called price discovery. And that is, as the supply and demand go up and down, eventually they converge at a point where the price being paid by those who are in demand is justified by either the scarcity or abundance of the material being sought. But over the last several months, gold traders have noticed that price discovery mechanism is clearly broken. Demand is going up, supply is going down. We should see gold prices going right through the roof, and yet they do not. Why? Because like everything else, including the American stock market, it's being rigged and controlled. We do not have a free economy in this country. It's all being centrally managed from Washington, D.C. And one needs only look at the economic decline of the Soviet Union to see that that kind of central planning and control does not work. Now, before we get further into the economy, I'm looking at this story that is just now coming in, that Erdogan is vowing retaliation after the bombing in Ankara. And we knew that's what he was going to do. This is a classic false flag. Now the war is on, and he doesn't care what the United Nations says. All right. Now, getting on back to the economy. China currently leads the global U.S. debt dump. This is not something you're going to see on the corporate media. In December, okay, we got a big military helicopter flying right over our roof right now. In December, China dumped $18 billion, with a B, dollars worth of U.S. treasuries. Japan sold $22 billion. This past year, Mexico, Turkey, Belgium have begun getting out of U.S. treasuries. It was a record annual dump by the central bank. So, who's dumb enough to buy these treasury bonds? Actually, in a way, you are. And I'll explain when we come back from these commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Now, before the commercial break, we're talking about all these nations around the world that are dumping U.S. treasuries. Because there is a U.S. Treasury bubble. The Treasury Department has printed up more Treasury bonds than could ever possibly redeemed. There are not enough American taxpayers. Even at a 100% tax rate, they cannot redeem all that paper. So everybody's dumping the treasuries. Who's dumb enough to buy these things? Well, actually, in a roundabout way, you're buying them. And you're being kept dumb. You're being kept in the dark. There's a little-known U.S. program called the Exchange Stabilization Fund. Now, this is a fund that goes on in and keeps the markets stabilized. It's sort of an older version of the plunge protection team. And basically, they go to the Federal Reserve and say, we need to prevent the Treasury bond from collapsing. So give us a whole bunch of money and we'll buy up the Treasury bonds as fast as they're being dumped by other countries, and that's what's going on. Of course, that money pouring out of the Federal Reserve is considered a loan to you, the American people, at interest, which you and your descendants will be forced to pay. To buy Treasury bonds, which are ultimately going to turn out to be worthless. It's just another way of dumping the losses from our Ponzi scheme banking system onto you, the American people, and that is fascism. All right, we're going to grab a phone call here. David in Georgia, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Michael, first-time caller. I was just wondering with the cashless society, how are the politicians going to get their payoffs? I'll listen offline.
Well, I mean, that's a very good idea, how they're going to get the payoffs. Probably launder it through HSBC. Of course, the big question for me is, if we have a cashless society, what are the politicians going to be tucking into the G-strings of the strippers? And again, even in states where prostitution is legal, the fact that you can't be anonymous and pay for it in cash is going to crash that industry. But the bankers don't care what harm they cause. They never have. All they want is control over all the wealth of the world. They already consider all the money in the country to be their property. They've just been loaning it to you with interest for 100 years, but it isn't really yours. Even that money that you get in your paycheck from your place of employment began as a loan. And so they literally view that it all belongs to them, and it's within their right to do whatever they want with it to maximize their profits. Okay?
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you very much. We're going to let you go here. Okay, now then, apparently there's a big stink coming up over in the Union Hall for truck drivers, because apparently 270,000 truckers have just been informed that their pensions will be cut up to 60%. That's a 6-0, more than half. Needless to say, retired union workers are very angry because they paid into the pension funds all their lives, just like you've been paying into Social Security, and now they're being told because of the Wall Street problems, they're going to have to lose the pensions. The pensions are not going to be able to keep their promises. And by the way, it was only a couple of months ago that the U.S. government literally passed a law making it legal for pension funds to break their commitment to the pensioners. Up until then, if a pension fund was unable to meet its obligations, it would default. The government would take over and make sure that the people who were on these pensions got the money they were supposed to get. Now they're saying, too bad, you're out of luck. And we're seeing this all over the country, whether it's a trucker's pension fund or public workers' pension fund, because back in 2008, at the height of the mortgage-backed security fraud, Wall Street's ratings agencies rated these mortgage bundles AAA. And that made it legal for pension funds to invest in these mortgage bundles. There are very strict laws regulating what pension funds can invest in because you're dealing with a segment of the population, old people. They don't have the luxury of picking up and starting all over again to rebuild their lives. If their retirement is destroyed, that's it. They're stuck. They're homeless. That's why those laws are there. But by declaring these mortgage-backed securities, AAA, all these pension funds bought into them. Then, of course, the whole fraud collapsed, and pensions were defunded. And instead of going back to Wall Street and saying, hey, you defrauded us and cheated us, make good on all of this, these pensions, especially the public workers' pensions. Remember Wisconsin, that big stink? Scott Walker and all of that, they turn around and say, well, we're sorry, you're out of luck. Thanks for all the money you paid in over the years, but we can't give it back to you. And they're getting ready to do the same thing with Social Security. And that's what comes from having a banking system that does not serve the nation, the people, the common good, but only serves itself. Now, over in other parts of the world that are being managed a little bit better, the first Silk Road train has made the trip from China to Tehran. It took 14 days carrying containerized freight. And that is significant because that is 30 days shorter than the time it takes to send that same freight by ship around the bottom of the continents. They can deliver a higher volume of cargo, faster, quicker. And at this point, it looks like it's even less expensive. But that's very significant. We're starting to see the world economic activity center on Asia and the Middle East. And we're being cut out. Now, there's an article that came out of Sputnik News talking about Iran's moving away from the dollar, which is one of the reasons why the U.S. is targeting Iran. Because the petrodollar deal requires that every oil-producing nation on earth only sell their oil for dollars. That's the reason they went into Iraq. It's the reason they went into Libya. It's the reason they're going into all these Middle Eastern nations to make sure that oil is only sold for U.S. dollars so that anybody who needs to buy that oil first has to come to the United States and either borrow those dollars at interest or bring us manufactured goods and agricultural produce in exchange for stacks of ink and paper. It was a very sweet deal for the United States of America. But the rest of the world is turning away from it. They don't see a reason why the U.S. should be so wealthy on a mafia-like piece of the action of everybody else's labor on earth. But of course, to the private central bankers, they say, that's what we set it up for. You work, we get rich. What's wrong with that? It's a great system. We love it. But Iran is insisting that moving the oil away from the dollar into the euro, yuan, and ruble, it's not politics. It's just good business sense. They don't trust the dollar any longer, and with good reason. Over in Paris, they're still having protests by farmers who have suffered tremendous financial harm from all these Russian sanctions. A lot of these people have lost their farms and their homes over this misguided rush to create a new war with Russia. Oh, the Russians are bad. Really? It's the U.S. that's causing all the harm in Europe economically. Apparently in Great Britain, austerity is starting to show up in England's death rate, the biggest rise since World War II. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And before we get back to economic news, there's a breaking story coming out of INFOWARS, who sent one of their reporters over to this resort where Scalia met his untimely artificial end. And notably, the media in that part of Texas is towing the official government line. The INFOWARS reporter wanted to ask some questions about the strange circumstances surrounding the judge's death, only to be told apparently there is a media blackout ordered by this same judge. There will be no questions about what happened. We will tell you what to think. You will believe what we tell you to believe. Mahi dictum est. They're just making the situation look worse. They've really messed it up. All right, we're going to grab a phone call. Dan in Missouri, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I was wanting to talk about the 1952 race for president and how Dwight Eisenhower made a deal with Judge Warren to basically give him the first available Supreme Court justice position as a payback for not running against Mr. Eisenhower. And so they had the Chief Justice come open, and Mr. Warren called Mr. Eisenhower out and basically forced him to give him the Chief Justice position.
Well, that's how politics is played. And again, I think back in 2008, we were looking at that secret meeting between Obama and Hillary, where basically it appears that a deal was made for Hillary to stop trying to steal the election and let Obama be president, and in exchange Hillary would get to be Secretary of State, where she could just make tons and tons, millions and millions of dollars with the shenanigans she was playing, whether it was pay for play, which was the same thing that led to the Ron Brown assassination, or, and I'm still convinced this was happening, selling U.S. top secrets to foreign governments in exchange for donations to her fund. And, then with this understanding that Obama would help Hillary into the White House after he left, which certainly seems to be the case with his current statement about how Obama believes Trump will never be the president because it's not a reality show. To which Trump commented that Obama has done a terrible job as president, which is certainly true enough. I have to look at that statement by Obama where he absolutely believes Trump will not be president of the United States of America. He's either relying on Diebold or Smith & Wesson at this point, I think. And again, it may be that the reason they made Scalia's assassination so obvious was to send a warning message to Trump, because apparently that malfunction on his aircraft a few weeks back didn't connect. So, anyway, okay?
That's basically the death of the Supreme Court Justice in 53 could have been suspicious.
Well, that was back in 1953, and we're in the 21st century right now, and I want to deal with what's going on right now before us that we can deal with and not go traipsing through history from... I was 1 year old when that all happened. All right, Dan, thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Now, back to the economy. Very alarming story. Believe it or not, the U.S. Marshal Service in Houston, Texas, is starting to arrest people who are not making the payments on their student loans. Now, that whole student loan situation was just another scam. The cost of a college education has skyrocketed way out of proportion with the rate of inflation. Funding for people to go to school, scholarships, has dried up. It's just another mechanism for taking young people and jamming them onto that barbed debt hook as hard and as early as possible and never letting them off. And, of course, these kids got these student loans because they were being assured by the college recruiters that when they graduated with their degree in Sanskrit or whatever it was, liberal arts, that there would be high-paying jobs out there that would make it easy for them to pay off the student loans. And, of course, that didn't happen because that's how you maintain debt slaves. You get them to borrow money with promises of better times where they can pay it off, and then you make sure those better times never happen. And that's been the pattern, whether it's college students or foreign nations with the IMF that will loan them money, and then somehow the means for this country to pay back the debt and get to be free again gets sabotaged. The Federal Reserve and the IMF and all these, they don't care about the money. They know it's just ink and paper. It's just made-up fantasies. What they're about is ownership of the hard assets and enslavement of the population. That's what this system was set up to do. And there is a student loan bubble, just like there's a treasury bond bubble. Now, getting on to the campaign here, apparently over in South Carolina, and Trump is way ahead in the polls, the TV stations pulled a pro-Cruz ad that was using the San Bernardino shootings to attack Rubio, and apparently Cruz needs to revise his media buying people because he had that embarrassment with the porn actress, and then he's got this ad, which apparently the lawyers at the TV station, the legal folks, reviewed it and said this is in violation of standards and practices and laws. So he's had a problem there. Marco Rubio's got his own embarrassment because apparently his campaign ad, Morning in America, with the opening skyline, and it's beautiful and everything, except the skyline is Vancouver, Canada. And that's a huge embarrassment. I don't know, maybe Ted Cruz can recycle and use the footage since he is Canadian and ineligible to be President of the United States of America. And by the way, that may become an issue because Donald Trump is now threatening to sue Ted Cruz over his eligibility to be President of the United States of America. And it's a good, solid case. Cruz was born in Canada. His parents were Canadian citizens at the time of his birth. He is not a natural-born U.S. citizen. The GOP should have never even allowed him to become a candidate. But the party leadership seems to be operating in a world where the laws and rules don't apply to them, only to you, the worker drones. South Carolina isn't Bush country anymore. Bush is throwing a tantrum saying that Donald Trump has hijacked his party. Now they're hauling out the entire Bush family, trying to get Jeb Bush back in the game. George W. is on the campaign trail. George H.W. is on the campaign trail. Barbara's on the trail. Keep hearing the media saying, you know, Bush is going to take off from here. Bush is going to take off from here. No, he isn't. At this point, he is roadkill. And unfortunately, bringing back George Herbert Walker Bush and George W. Bush, that's not going to get him off the ground. That is going to be the funeral for this guy. Now, Trump is out there saying, with regards to Iraq, Bush lied, people died. It's been a constant meme here on the internet. And, of course, the GOP leadership is taking the how dare you approach, because they don't have anything else. How dare you say that Bush lied? Well, Bush did say Saddam has nuclear weapons. No, he did not. And the evidence Bush presented to support that assertion turned out to be forged and fraudulent. So we reposted the story, the lie of the century, the lie of the last century now, to our front page. And you need to send that around to everybody to document the fact that Donald Trump is right. George Bush lied to get us into the Iraq War, and a lot of people died who did not need to. And the GOP leadership and the media is like, how dare you say that about the president? It's true. It's true. The fact that you're a president doesn't mean that you are above being called out on your lies. That's what the First Amendment is about. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about the campaign and the candidates. And as you know, Donald Trump has aroused the ire of the GOP establishment by saying that George W. Bush lied to the country about Saddam having nuclear weapons to get us into that war in which a lot of people died. And, of course, indignation is the only card they have to play because George W. Bush did lie to us about Saddam having nuclear weapons to get us into the war with Iraq. You know, it's kind of hard to overcome that one. We're still seeing the after effects of the debate moment where Jeb Bush was out there riding his older brother's coattails by saying that George W. Bush kept this nation safe. And Trump said, well, 9/11 happened on your brother's watch. And everybody got, lather and frothing about, how dare you talk about it. So Dick Cheney is out there calling Donald Trump a liberal Democrat for daring to criticize any handling of 9/11. And it's absurd. But name-calling and smearing and how dare you is all they've got. And the good news is that Dick Cheney doing this has made discussions about 9/11 a current topic. It's not in the history books anymore. And for that matter, because of Scalia's assassination, All the other questionable deaths are now current topics, whether it's John F. Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Vince Foster, Ron Brown. It's all current grist for the mill, which is why I reprised all of these articles to the front page of WhatReallyHappened.com so that you can take them and mail them around to everybody and say, there is a there. We were lied to get us into the war in Iraq. We were lied to get us into all of these countries. We were lied into World War II. We were lied into World War I. We were lied into the Spanish-American War. How many more times are you going to have to be lied to before you stand up and say, oh, wow, the government lies to us? So, we did put up all of our articles about 9/11, the shaped charges, the obvious demolition marks on the load-bearing members of the towers, the 5 dancing Israelis, and, of course, my all-time favorite, the Secret Service at Booker Elementary School, the dog that did not bark. To me, that was what made it really obvious. And again, because of Dick Cheney screaming at Donald Trump for pointing out that 9/11 did happen under the George W. Bush presidency, it's a current topic again. Now, Hillary Clinton is in decline. The excitement around her is waning. And she's got Bill out there and Chelsea out there campaigning for her, and Chelsea is playing to empty seats. On Monday, there was a video of her talking to a very small room, and they couldn't even fill that. Now, MoveOn.org has mounted a petition drive, and we've got a link to that from WhatReallyHappened.com, to petition the superdelegates to promise that they will vote for the candidate who wins the popular vote. This is a backlash from what happened up in New Hampshire, where Bernie Sanders overwhelmingly won the popular vote, and because of party machinery, Hillary came out with the same number, possibly more delegates. That's still kind of a gray area because there are 2 superdelegates who will not say who they're voting for. And it is a question of who's going to decide the election, the people or party insiders. And I've read that Constitution. There's nothing in there about party insiders being allowed to overturn the will of the people. Now, Hillary's in serious trouble. And so what is she doing? Well, according to this article coming out of Patriot Rising, it's all America's fault. Hillary isn't rising in the polls and she's not winning the popular vote because you Americans just aren't ready for a woman president. It's all your fault in Hillary's mind. Travelgate, Cattle Futures, Whitewater, Castle Grant, Flowerwood, the Arkansas Development Finance Authority, Vince Foster, Chinagate, has nothing to do with it. Hillary's difficulties are all the fault of the American people because we just hate the idea of a woman president. Which is absurd. We hate the idea of certain individuals being president. I don't have a problem with a woman president. I still think that if John McCain had tapped Hawaii's Governor Linda Lingle instead of Caribou Barbie, he might actually have won. And I will grant you, Linda Lingle does not look as good in a bikini as Sarah Palin, or at least she used to. But Linda at least knows the job. I wouldn't have had a problem with Linda Lingle being vice president or president. Sarah Palin was a beauty contest winner with pretensions of grandeur, and Hillary is a crook. Okay, we're going to grab ourselves a phone call. Will in Ohio, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I wanted to commend you for your handling of the shills yesterday, per se. It was you're a better man. You're a better man than I, Mike. I think we need to hammer home. We really need to hammer it home to people how far back this corruption goes. I mean, even all the way to Watergate with this lady. It's the time comes when it's the duty of intelligent men to restate the obvious.
And women.
George Orwell, I think.
And women, intelligent women.
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry. Also, man, that connects with the judge most likely. Let's say it wouldn't surprise me, you know. I mean, just got to pound it home to people. I think people are waking up and starting to see it.
Oh, of course they are. That's why Hillary did so badly in New Hampshire. That's why, Trump is doing so well in the polls. Bernie Sanders is doing so well in the polls. And it's not so much support for Sanders and Trump. It is a rejection of the current status quo. It's a rejection of the corrupted political establishment. And they're trying to get past that with the superdelegates and with election rigging. And now that the people are aware of both of those, they become less effective. People are watching for election fraud. It's not going to get past them. Now that people know about the superdelegate chicanery, there's a pushback coming. There could even be a lawsuit against the political parties over the superdelegates. It is clearly unconstitutional. There is nothing in the Constitution that says a party machine, and remember, the political parties are private corporations. They're private organizations. They're not actually part of the government. And for them to hijack the will of the voters is clearly unconstitutional.
Absolutely. Hey, I think Trump should maybe put something out there and let people know, hey, if you see fraud and you can prove it, put a bounty out for it. Put some money out.
He may. I'm starting to get communications from the Trump people here on Oahu, and we're going to be hitting one of their meetings here real soon. We'll make the suggestion, but if you see election fraud of any kind, you can report it to blackboxvoting.org, and Bev Harris will take it and get it investigated, and she's already busy this election year. This is going to be a crooked election. The wet work has already started, and I have a feeling that Scalia will not be the last strange death that we will see before the end of this year. Okay?
Yeah, it's getting weird. It's
getting dangerous. Thanks a lot for the phone call, Will. We're going to let you go here. We are seeing more and more voices coming forward saying that it's time to deal with this email scandal in a forthright manner. And Jerry Schenk over at Potsdam.com is saying, shady land deals, Rose Law Firm, cattle futures, sex abuse and everything. Oh, that's a problem. But this issue of the email server and the classified documents on it is a whole level above that, where Hillary had highly classified U.S. documents on an unsecured private server. Even Dick Cheney is out there saying anybody who is exposed to these documents is told the rules, and Hillary knowingly violated them. That shows intent, malice aforethought, to commit felony violations of Title 18. She should already be in prison awaiting trial, not going into the South Carolina primary. All right, we got to take another break here for our top of the hour commercials and our news. When we come on back, Larry Pinckney will be our guest. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3, and the phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. We are having difficulty connecting with our guest, Larry Pinckney. We're going to keep on trying to connect with him, and if not, we'll just reschedule. Now, even Dick Cheney is out there saying that Hillary's private email server raises questions about her fitness to be president. Now, he's not talking about going in and investigating the server or possible espionage. He's just out there saying that she has shown poor judgment and recklessness simply because she did know better than to do what she did. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't an oversight. Anybody who has ever been exposed to classified documents, who's gotten a clearance, knows the FBI sits you down and you get a lecture about how you will handle these various documents, how you will receive them, how you will protect them, and how you will surrender them when your clearance is revoked, which it usually is at the end of the job that you're on. Security clearances are not permanent. But overall, we're seeing Hillary's worst enemies are still trying to sort of let this issue go away. Bernie Sanders in that first Democratic debate, I don't want to hear about the email server. Tired of hearing about it. The GOP leadership, we don't need to look there anymore. Here you have an issue that could hand Bernie Sanders the nomination or hand the Republicans the White House, and they don't want to go anywhere near it. That tells you there is a big, deep, dark. Okay, let's see. Hang on a second. You're on hold, waiting for the phone contact? All right, hang on a second. I'm trying to sort out the situation with Larry, and I'm sorry to do this, but there's only one of me, and when I'm communicating with our guests, I am not able to talk to you. All right, I'm back. Now, interestingly enough, there's a very bizarre report that just surfaced because we've been hearing for the last couple of days, Trump, double-digit leads, he's all over the place. Then all of a sudden, out of thin air, NBC News has a new poll that shows Ted Cruz is surging into the lead. And if you believe that one, I have some of Saddam's nuclear weapons to sell you. Now, we know polls are less secure than elections, and U.S. elections are a joke in terms of accuracy and security. But if they're going to try and steal South Carolina from Trump to give it to Cruz, who is ineligible to run as president, they have to convince the public that, oh, yes, there was a sudden change in public opinion. And so I view this announcement by NBC as a prelude to an attempt to steal the South Carolina primary. And we had a couple of those going into New Hampshire, where all of a sudden there were these polls that said, oh, Hillary is way ahead of Bernie Sanders. Trump is being crushed. And, of course, the final result of the election was very different. So I am not really expecting there to be a surprise in South Carolina, absent massive election fraud. And I hope people who are in South Carolina will be looking and watching very carefully. Okay, now we have him. Joining us on the phone now is Larry Pinckney. And Larry, thank you very much for spending time with us today.
Thank you.
And first of all, for the benefit of our listeners, and I want to apologize, when you called into my show before, I didn't recognize your name and who you were, but you are a person of some historical note. Would you kind of give our listeners a quick overview of your background?
Well, first of all, Brother Mike, you don't owe me any apologies. Dash that. I was honored to call in, and you let me speak, and that was really what it was all about. So thank you once again. Right. My background is that I am a veteran of the original Black Panther Party, not the so-called new Black Panther Party, government agents, provocateurs. I am a former Minister of Interior of the Republic of New Africa. I'm a former political prisoner, having been in prison wrongfully for 10 years, and I'm the only American to have successfully self-authored, and I emphasize self-authored, my civil political rights case to the United Nations under the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. I can go on and on and on, but you know what? Bottom line is the struggle continues. I've been honored to have been interviewed in a number of places, including on the Alex Jones show, and actually quite a few other places, but that doesn't really matter. The point is that black, white, brown, red, and yellow people had better damn well understand that we are under attack. And we are under attack from and by a government which we do not run or control or really have any influence upon, to be frank about it, to be candid. So that's it in a nutshell. I'm sorry I was so succinct, but it's really not about me. It's a we struggle. It's us, all of us together, all of my brothers and sisters of all colors together. So that's what I have to say about that, if that's okay, Mike.
No, that's absolutely fine here. But the reason I wanted to have your history out there is because a lot of what people think they know about the original Black Panthers is yet another government distortion. And anybody who has studied the FBI's COINTELPRO program out of the 1960s understands how the original Black Panthers were mischaracterized, infiltrated. They were hoaxed with that Black Panther coloring book, and all of this came out in the COINTELPRO hearings in the 1970s. And the goal back then, as it is today, is to fracture the American people along racial lines, age lines, whatever lines they can find, and keep us fighting amongst ourselves so that we cannot unite as a single people against government abuse.
That's right. And I appreciate the fact that you clearly are cognizant, my brother, of the reality. See, obviously the distortion with respect to the original Black Panther Party goes on even today. But, you know, it's not just the Black Panther Party, it's other organizations as well. I don't give a damn what the colors are, all right? And in terms biologically speaking, you know, they have us believe, for example, that the Civil War was fought over slavery. It was not. It was fought over money, economic, period. Let's be honest, okay? Let's be honest. And you know, so of course the original Black Panther Party has been distorted. What we attempted to do, we had the unmitigated audacity to stand up and tell black people, you know what you need to do for self? Stop depending on the government, because when you depend on the government, that means you are dependent upon the government. Therefore, they control you. You are nothing more than a slave. And today, all my brothers and sisters, black, white, brown, red, and yellow, we are slaves. But we don't have to be slaves. Like Harriet Tubman, the great abolitionist, said, she said, I freed 1,000 slaves. I could have freed 1,000 more if only I could have convinced them that they were slaves. And that's what you and people like me are trying to do, is to get people to wake the freak up, to understand that we must take back the power. Thomas Jefferson said that every generation needs a new revolution. Every generation. That wasn't Malcolm X. That was Thomas Jefferson. All right? And I respect Malcolm, don't get me wrong, but Thomas Jefferson was absolutely correct. And in the 21st century, instead of moving forward, we have moved backward under the auspices of the power elite of the Democrat and Republican parties, and, of course, under this caricature known as Barack Obama, drone man. You know, NDAA signing man.
Yes, one Nobel Prize winner bombing another Nobel Prize winner. Larry, we've got to take a 4-minute break for commercials, and we'll be right back with Larry Pinckney. And I have a feeling we're going to go a little bit longer on this interview than I thought. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And it can be said that the very best slaves are those who think they're free, because then they don't see their slave chains. And if they don't see the slave chains, they can't strain against them. And if you look at slave cultures throughout history, whether it's ancient Rome or medieval Europe or even the United States, the slavery worked because the slaves were brainwashed that this is the way that life is supposed to be. And we are seeing that currently under our private central bank system of debt slavery, where we're brainwashed from birth to think this is the way life is supposed to be. There are no alternative systems, even though we understand from history this nation started with a very different system. And as you pointed out, Larry, the Civil War was about money. And if you think about it, ultimately all wars are about wealth, power, control, and money. Everything else that's come along there, you know, humanitarian intervention, bringing democracy to the people, those are just the lies used to sell the wars to us. And as you know, between Jeb Bush and Donald Trump, there's a big stink over the fact that, yes, George W. Bush did lie to us about Saddam's nuclear weapons to trick us into that war. So, again, going back to the 1960s COINTELPRO, the government was trying to divide us. They were going after the civil rights movement. They went after the anti-war movement. They went after the early feminists, the Native Americans. This is the way government keeps us under control. And you were right there in the heart of part of that all the way back in the 1960s. And I know I'm rambling on. I'm going to give you the microphone here in just a second. I remember when I was a kid living with my parents in Southern California. We were in a white neighborhood. We were well removed from Watts and all, but we still got a copy of that fake Black Panther coloring book in our mail one day, and I remember all the fact, why did we get this? And of course the media, the media was saying, oh, this is from the Black Panthers. See, they hate the white people. You should be afraid. You shouldn't listen to them. And it succeeded in getting the white people so scared of the black people that we stopped listening to the legitimate concerns and grievances of our fellow Americans.
Sure, you're right. Sure, you're right. And the bottom line is, let me share something with you and your audience. And by the way, I want to express my appreciation to your audience all over the world, the United States and the world. Let me say, you know, when I joined the party in the Black Panther Party, original Black Panther Party in 1967. The party was formed in October of 66, however. Anyway, in 67, when I joined the party, one of my first tasks was to go out to my white brothers and sisters. You dig? My white brothers and sisters. And I think that the party did that because even though I came from a very poor family, both of my parents were school teachers, certified school teachers. You dig? Mm-hmm. So I spoke a certain way. I listened. I studied. I read. And that was very important to me. The party recognized that and said, Larry, your task is to go out there and you talk to our allies. You let them know that they are our allies. And, you know, but of course, that message, right up to today in 2016, right up to today, that reality, that narrative, that message has still not been put across to our brothers and sisters. All of our brothers. And when I say brothers and sisters, I'm talking about black, white, brown, red, and yellow. You dig? I'm talking about all my brothers and sisters, humanity, okay? The shades of the rainbow, that's us. And COINTELPRO, the so-called counterintelligence program, was a program that was brought into being, and I submit to you, Mike, that COINTELPRO still exists.
Yes, I agree.
It exists under different names. It still exists. It still goes on. In fact, it's been tweaked. It's been tweaked. And you know, we have our brothers and sisters out there laboring under the illusion that we have some kind of democracy. We don't have democracy. We have plutocracy and hypocrisy. It's time for the people. It is time for we the people to take our country back. Am I suggesting or implying that America was perfect? By no means. We were not. But you know what? No nation on God's good earth has ever been perfect. So, you know, we have to take our country back. We're going to have disagreements. We should have disagreements because if we don't, somebody's a robot, somebody's lying. And we don't want liars. We want our brothers and sisters to be honest with each other and to make real systemic change. I'm sorry. I'm digressing, brother. Forgive me. Mike, I'll shut up and listen to you.
Well, no, actually, I'm listening to what you're saying, and it's bringing back to me some of the passion that we did feel back in the 60s when we were all trying to pull together against the war in Vietnam, against some of the stuff that was coming out of the Nixon administration. And you're right, it still goes on. When COINTELPRO was revealed, it seriously threatened the legitimacy of the United States government, and Congress passed laws saying you guys can't do this anymore. But those laws were all very quietly repealed during the administration of Bill Clinton. They literally went out to the FBI and said, it's now legal for you to go on out and do these terrible things that you did. They were ruining the careers of everybody in Hollywood that was challenging the status quo, and I got a taste of that myself back in 1994 when my career got destroyed because I called into doubt the official story on the death of White House Deputy Counsel Vince Foster. So yeah, I know firsthand it is still going on. Now let's talk about the superdelegates, because that gets right to the heart of the issue. Do we really have a democracy or not?
No. Let me be honest. And I know that might pain some people, but it pains me too. But the reality is we do not. How can you possibly? I mean, let's go into, for example, let's use the most recent example, or two examples. One of Iowa. I call it the coin toss caucuses the Democratic Party had. We're gonna flip a coin and see who won. Look, I'm not a Democrat and I'm not a Republican. You dig? If anything, I'm an independent, and I probably lean towards the libertarian, but I'm not a Democrat or a Republican. I believe in populism and the power, as we said back in the day, I believe in all power to the people. That was our slogan. And in 2016, I still believe in all power to the people. Now, having said that, the counterintelligence program has been morphed, as I said before, and tweaked, okay? And we've got this scoundrel, this usurper, Barack Obama, and his backers. It's not just Obama. It's Democrats and Republicans and the power elite. They represent that. Superdelegates basically take the whole concept, if you will, of one person, one vote away. I mean, who are these superdelegates? I'll tell you who they are. Bill Clinton is one. A superdelegate. So it doesn't matter what way a caucus goes, or even a primary as in New Hampshire. You see, it doesn't really matter because the superdelegates will step in, as they have done on behalf of this butcher, Hillary Clinton. All right.
Larry, I'm sorry to cut you off mid-stride here, but we got another 4-minute break. Hold that thought. I want to come back to Hillary Clinton and the superdelegates. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Our guest today is Larry Pinckney, and I'm already getting chats and emails from people just absolutely enjoying your being on the show here and telling us about all this that's been going on and is still going on. I think that had the Internet and the independent media as it exists now been around back in the 1960s, the government would not have been able to have gotten away with all that they did under COINTELPRO and attacks against the anti-war movement, that staged riot at Disneyland, the coloring book, and the rest of it. And maybe that's the reason why they're in such a panic today, because they're still using those tactics that worked in the 1950s, 1960s, and 1970s, but it doesn't have the same effect. People are seeing through the frauds. They're seeing through the false flags. And I think that's why we're seeing these ridiculous attacks on the Bill of Rights, free speech zones, absolute panic trying to get around that Second Amendment. And I think my analysis of where we're going in this country is we're going to see a major economic whoopsie, and we're going to see it drag down the federal government the way the former Soviet Union collapsed. And then we're going to have to take care of each other for a little while, and then we set up a brand new country on the original constitutional model, and we have some very ironclad rules, like no private central banks. But there is so much about our nation today that was never intended by the framers of the Constitution. This idea of having only two political parties is not in the Constitution. And we're finding out today that despite the media presentation that we're all Republican or Democrat, that there's a large part of the American people who don't identify with either party. Like you, they're independent, or they're libertarian, or they're green, or they're just saying, I've studied the Republicans and the Democrats, and frankly, anarchy's looking attractive at this point. So this entrenched power structure does seem to be on the wane. But, of course, cornered animals are the most dangerous, and that's why we're seeing this reckless behavior coming out of Washington, D.C. I know you wanted to talk about President Drone. Martin Luther King, I have a dream. President Obama, I have a drone. And it almost seems like there are too many people in Washington, D.C., who think getting us tangled up in a bloody world war is their best option, because it's going to distract us from all the crimes and corruptions and tyranny that we've been having to endure. What is your take regarding this ridiculous rush toward war?
Well, the bottom line is the rush toward war goes right back to what I had said about the so-called Civil War in the United States. It's about economics, you dig?
Yes.
President Eisenhower warned us. He warned us in his departing speech about the military-industrial complex. What Eisenhower could not have foreseen was the rise of the corporate plutocracy in addition to the military-industrial complex. Central banks are nothing more than bloodsuckers. Come on, people. Come on, brothers and sisters. Let's be honest. That's what they are. They bloodsuck us. Then they get bailed out or bailed in, take your choice, with whose money? With our money, with our blood, with our sweat, with our tears. Everyday, ordinary black, white, brown, red, and yellow people. And so the reality is that we, the people, and I go back, I love that expression, we, the people, have to say, you know what, no more. All of you so-and-sos, out of the room. In fact, if you can get off the planet, leave now, today, if not sooner. And we have to understand that it is our obligation to re-energize our sisters and brothers of all colors, of all ages. You see, the whole thing about the rush to war is really the rush, what I call the rush to greed. Back in the day in the Black Panther Party, the original party, we used the term avaricious. Avaricious. Whether we're talking about Lockheed Martin, General Electric, Raytheon, I mean, I can go on and on. But it's the greed for that small percent, 1.5% or wherever they are, you dig? But the other 99% or 98.7%, we're getting screwed. And it's time for us to say, you know what? No more. No more. And we have to go back to our roots, to our foundations, and to the ideals. I didn't say idea. I said to our ideals with an L at the end of the word. Ideal. And that's why I have respect for America. Because its ideal is what I believe in. You dig? And the Democrats and the Republicans have sold out those ideals, all in the name of wrapping themselves around the flag. The flag that really should be dotted with corporation. Not stars representing the state, but corporation. And so the rush to war is all about the rush to greed for that powerful, small, but powerful, blood-sucking, avaricious elite, my brother.
Well, I'd like to interject a comment here because I think what is the real issue here, if you're a greedy person, you can feed that in ways that are not destructive to society, like, design a new product or make a movie or something like that. I think the real heart of the issue is that segment of our population who truly believe that all the wealth is supposed to pour into their pockets and they don't have to give anything back for it. And these are the people who go out and game the system and buy the politicians and try and enslave us to hopelessly unpayable debt to keep us under their control. And there is no greater creator of debt to the banks than wars. And that's why it's a repeating cycle. I mean, before the creation of the Federal Reserve, there was no such thing as a world war, and now we're here literally pressing the doorbell on big mistake number 3.
And the Federal Reserve is not federal, no more than the Federal Express.
Yes.
It's not even federal. That's a misnomer, and I'm not saying you're making a misnomer. I'm saying this is the kind of vomit. That's why I call the corporate stream media the vomit stream media. If they can't discredit you, they'll kill you. Or they'll do both, discredit you and then kill you. But you see what? The power of the people, as we said back in the day, is much stronger than these same old tired-ass tactics and strategies that these scum, and that's what they are. I'm speaking diplomatically because I could use other adjectives, but I'll be diplomatic and just call them scum. All right? And, we need to understand that when it gets right down to it, all of our brothers and sisters, we're in the same boat. It's like we're on the Titanic, all right? And they want to change the deck chair. Well, the damn ship's going down. Don't matter what chair you're sitting in. The whole ship is going down. And that's why we need to make what I constantly say is systemic change. And I depend on all of us, each other, including myself, including you, Mike, all of us, to bring about systemic change. And, I'm not talking about La La Land. I'm not talking about Pollyanna. I'm not talking about, it's going to be, no, it's going to be a struggle. It's going to be a struggle, but it should be a struggle. And we're going to have disagreements, and we should have disagreements. But damn it, as Brother Malcolm X said, when we walk out that door, we need to come out as a united front. Black, white, brown, red, yellow.
Okay, Larry.
And tired of being pimped.
All right, we got to take another 4-minute break here. We'll be back with the last segment of our program today and Larry Pinckney after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Last segment of our program today. We're talking with Larry Pinckney. And Larry, we got about 10 minutes here. I'd like you to talk about a specific topic. I'm sure you've discovered by now that as you go around to the radio shows and public speaking, that the population of young people today especially are much more aware of the reality of the nature of our government and nation than was the case back in the 1960s. But talking to those of us who are already aware isn't enough, and we need to start mobilizing people to go on out and talk to people who are still trapped in the matrix of corporate media and start to very gently start waking them up to what's going on. Don't confront them, don't shock them, don't traumatize them, but it's time for us to reach out to our non-internet connected brothers and sisters and start to pull them on board so that they understand what's going on. Larry, are you there? Okay, it looks like we may have lost our connection with Larry, and let me talk to the control room there. All right, well, if we've lost Larry, then I'm going to step in and say exactly what that is. We sit here writing our blogs, reading our blogs, sharing our blogs with each other. We do our little talk radio shows to an audience that is already very much on board with what we know and are saying. We're preaching to the choir, to use another metaphor. At this point, as we face a potential for a brand new world war.
Sorry, there he is.
Oh, Larry, are you there?
I am here.
Okay.
I'm listening to every word you're saying.
I don't know why we lost our connection there, but would you just sort of pick up from what I was starting to say and fill it on out for yourself?
Yeah, what I want to say is, first of all, you're definitely on the absolute correct trail, the right track, you dig? And I think that what we need to do is be gentle but firm with the young folks or the younger folks, because we might be old, I might be old, but we're still young. Mm-hmm. Young in the sense that the difference between us and the younger folks is that we draw the link. We dot the I's, we cross the T's, and we make the links, all right? And that's, of course, what the corporate plutocracy, the power elite, does not want us to do. And we need to do it more. Now, I don't want to go on and on because I'm sure you want to cover other stuff, but I just want to say this, that there's enormous potential. Now, we're going to have agent provocateurs from the government, whether it's Democrat or Republican. That's what they do. I mean, how else can you try to control and manipulate people? We need to expect that. We're going to have false flags. Well, that's what they do, all right? But if we inform our brothers and sisters, they don't go for the ghost, as we used to say back in the day. Don't go for the ghost. Come on, wake up, see it for what it really is, and share it with your other brothers and sisters. So I'm gonna stop right there. But, you know, our young people, I'm going to go back to what Thomas Jefferson said. Every generation needs a new revolution. He was right. About that, he was absolutely correct. So I'm going to shut up, bro.
All right, well, thank you for those words here, and you're absolutely right. There does need to be a revolution every once in a while. The revolution that is underway right now is thankfully nonviolent, but it is significant because what we have accomplished, the victory that we have today, and we need to understand and acknowledge, we have removed from the government their ability to lie to the public with impunity, and most of their power and authority has been based on that for decades. In fact, they've controlled us through lies for so long, they don't actually know any other way to run a country, and that's why they're so scared. If they can't tell us lies and be believed by the overwhelming majority of the public, they cannot control us any longer. That's why in the current issue where Donald Trump is saying that George W. Bush lied to us about Saddam's nuclear weapons to get us into war, that's why the entire GOP establishment is up in arms. They're still trying to get us back to that world where they make a pronouncement, the corporate media feeds it to us, there's no feedback, and they're believed, and they can go on doing as they please. And we have taken that away from them. And we have the right to take that ability to lie with impunity away from them, because I've read that Constitution, and nowhere in there does it say the government has a right to lie us into wars, new taxes, take our money, take our children, to play their little global games of empire. It's just not in there. So that's a victory, and that's a successful revolution, and nobody had to get hurt, wear Band-Aids or anything to accomplish that.
Well, the fact of the matter is, with all due respect to you, my brother, and you know I love you, but I got to say this. I don't know where this is going to go, but I do believe in my heart of hearts that no matter what comes down, that once, it's like a sleeping dragon. When the dragon wakes up, watch the heck out. You dig?
Yes.
And the dragon in this country is beginning to awaken. And that's why the establishment, whether it's Democrat or Republican, RNC or DNC, they're panicking. It's like, oh, God, what's happening? What's happening is the people are awakening and saying no more. And that's where my hope comes in. And I ain't talking about that old jive time, half-stepping, lying hope of drone man, Mr. Hope and Change drone man. I'm talking about actualized hope. The hope of our nation, the hope of our people, the hope of Mother Earth. That's what we got going on. That's what we have for us. And I'm going to just go back and say, back to the day, 60s and 70s, all power to the people, because that ultimately is what it comes down to. And Mike, I want to just say to you very quickly, you have been working for many, many years to get the message out. And for that, brother, I thank you. For that, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. And we need more Mike Rivero. We need more Larry Pinkeys. We need more, all of us.
We do, but everybody here has the potential to be a new Larry or a new Michael. We're almost out of time here, and I just want to add one final comment. I am expecting the government to try and reassert their domination over us, but I think we've hit the stage where everything they try and do to restrict our freedoms is too obvious, and it calls attention to itself. And the fastest way to bring down a dictatorship is to force it to act like one where everybody can see it. And I think we're in that stage right now, because everything the government does to try and drag us back to the glory days of the 1960s, everybody says that's what the government's trying to do. They're trying to get us back to where we are dependent on them for our view of the world. And that is the first and most important dependency to break, is dependency on the government and its controlled media to understand what's going on in the world. We've got about 1 minute left.
Well, all I can say, I'm not going to take up the whole minute. I'm just going to say thank you to you, Brother Mike, and to your audience. You know, your audience is extremely important. So I thank all the sisters and brothers out there in the audience in what I call Mike Rivero land. And thank you so much for having me on. I hope I can come back one day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The positive email is just pouring in. Everybody loves it. We're definitely going to have you back on a regular basis if you have the time for that.
I always have the time for that. All power to the people. And thank you, Mike. Please take care. Stay strong. And as we say, watch your back and carry on.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We have been talking to Larry Pinckney, just obviously a very amazing gentleman, has the ability to speak and just grab you by the ears, and just listening to him, I've been dragged back to that energy that we had back in the 1960s when we were all trying to unite together against the war in Vietnam, against the abuses of the government, against the abuses of Richard Nixon. So there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. We'll be back tomorrow, Thursday, here on the Genesis Communication Network. Until then, stay informed, share what you know with people that you know. It's time to reach out to those who are not blessed with the Internet and the independent media and start to open their eyes up as to what's going on before we have mushroom clouds sprouting in all of our front lawns. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.